The rise of intolerance through socially engineered political correctness is causing law-abiding citizens to be targeted by hate groups masquerading as libertarians and anti-fascists. Even though the anti-terror laws effectively undermine all rights that were previously assumed to be inalienable, the rise of intolerance through funded agitation groups is an Orwellian scientific dictatorship which is on the rise. Our first Sunday show on autonomousmedia.net featured the intelligence-led mind control known as political correctness. The origins of this attack on the mind are in the intelligence organisations which came out of the Tavistock Institute and filtered down through think tanks and a spider's web of organisations which affect every aspect of your life, if you let them rule by fear, which is what they seem to be doing. Now, our recent shows such as Fascists UK, Hope Not Hate, Fascists Exposed and Hope Not Hate and Israel's lobbyists have revealed the intolerance and mind control at the heart of this so-called anti-fascist organisation. In reality, they are another agitation group funded by central government, George Soros and also the public through the Joe Cox Memorial Fund. A limited company and charitable trust, they can now legally be described as a terrorist organisation. See our previous shows on that. We have featured how the Joe Cox Memorial Fund, set up the day after her death, has used public money to fund two terrorist organisations, the White Helmets in Syria, who were embedded with al-Nusra and ISIS, and being complicit in the murder of Syrian patriots and Assad's army, whilst they're being promoted by globalists as peacekeepers. The Joe Cox Fund also gives large amounts of money to Hope Not Hate, who are actually inciting hatred and violence against those British citizens who dare to step outside the globalist mind control narrative. The recent protests promoted by Hope Not Hate against law-abiding citizens reveal the violent and intolerant hive mind which is being promoted to cause fracture points and conflict within society under this Orwellian politically correct narrative which is being enforced more and more heavily. Together with Antifa and the likes of Black Bloc, this organisation are attacking democratic free speech. Author and jazz musician Gilad Atzmon has been confronted by Antifa and posted a video about the encounter on YouTube. He has also been harassed by Hope Not Hate. The launch of his latest book, Being in Time, was cancelled in several venues due to intolerance and political correctness. The cultural Marxist brainwashing is a state-sponsored war against free-thinking and intelligent citizens. Welcome to Windows on the World. Now, author and jazz musician Gilad Atzmon has been confronted by Antifa and posted a video about this recent encounter on YouTube, but he's also been harassed by Hope Not Hate. The launch of his latest book, Being in Time, was cancelled in several venues due to intolerance and political correctness. This cultural Marxist brainwashing is a state-sponsored war against free-thinking and intelligent citizens. Gilad's latest book, Being in Time, talks about this identity politics, and the freedom to think openly is now just a distant memory. Being in Time is a courageous attempt to grasp the intellectual developments that led towards the current dystopia. That's a quote on the back of Gilad's latest book. Gilad, welcome to Windows on the World.
I'm very happy to be with you.
Well, it's a very interesting situation because we're now finding more and more people being targeted by these groups, and you've been targeted by both Antifa recently, who are this loose collective of so-called anti-fascists, and also by this group Hope Not Hate. Now, before we go into your background, could you tell us about Hope Not Hate and your interactions with them, because we've done several shows on this?
It was 3 or 4 years ago. I had a concert at Raise Your Banners, which is kind of a left radical musical celebration, and Hope Not Hate tried to get involved, tried to get the concert cancelled. They managed to pull in some members of the English Church of England, sorry, and then some Labour MPs, and they failed all the way through. Raise Your Banners didn't surrender. They obviously knew that all those accusations against me being an anti-Semite or fascist or whatever they want to call me are ludicrous. In fact, I am an anti-racist. This is my operation is clearly an attempt to expose and criticize some racist elements that are embedded in Jewish culture, especially Jewish secular culture, because there is a question whether, when we deal with Judaism, whether it is racism or kind of isolationism. They failed there. Then there was another attempt to smear me by Nick Laws, by this guy who ran this bizarre organization, Ain't No Hope. And they published a book about Holocaust denial. And I think that the only reason to do it was to try to include my name. But they had to say that I'm not actually a Holocaust denier. I just communicate with revisionists, which is true. I believe in freedom of speech, freedom of expression. I think that the best thing that happened to the West was has been this Athenian element of dialogue, conversation, philosophy, the love of wisdom, the love for scholarship. And I will talk to everyone, to anyone who has someone meaningful to say. And indeed, when it comes to the Holocaust, and I'm not original there, we can see that the Holocaust has become a religion. According to a very famous Israeli philosopher, Yeshaya Leibovich, Jews believe in many different things, but all Jews believe in the Holocaust.
That's right. It's a religion.
And it's a religion. It's a religion with clerics, with congregation centers, museums, and so on and so on. And I say, fine. If it's your religion, it's all fine. It's becoming now a Western religion. If it is your religion, I claim my right to be an atheist. And this doesn't necessarily imply denial, for instance, because nobody denies the fact that Hitler had a problem with the Jews. Nobody denies the fact that there were racial laws in Germany. Nobody denies the fact that Jews were expelled. Nobody denies the fact that Jews endured huge suffering under German occupation. Some people have issues with the particularities of this discrimination, or what really it means when it comes to figures, the measure of the destruction of the Jews, what really happened there. And I think that this is something that should be discussed openly. Once it is an established fact that we are afraid to deal with something, it only means one thing: we have something to deny. My favorite philosopher, Martin Heidegger, realized at a certain stage, and my take on Heidegger thought is borrowed from another great philosopher, from François Lyotard. They actually realized that history pretends to tell us what happened. What it does in practice, it is an institutional attempt to conceal our shame. So when it comes to the Jews, they have to conceal the embarrassing fact that wherever they go, they run into problems. Even after the Holocaust, after this disaster, the 48, they have a new Jewish state. They have an opportunity to open a new page, and we are going towards a disaster there. Israel is not doing very well. It is pretty much hated by every Arab in the region. Jewish history is a chain of Holocaust with a few coffee breaks. But Jews are not alone. Brits have a lot to conceal. If you go now to the British Wars Museum, Imperial Wars Museum, there is no British history. They turned it now into a Holocaust museum. They left one room for kind of two British tanks from World War One, and all the rest is Jewish problems. Americans, they have to conceal the slavery. They have to conceal, the atomic bombs that were dropped on innocent civilians for no reason. The war was actually in its final stage, and so on and so on. Every people find their method to conceal their shame through history, by means of history. And I think that my role, the role of the intellectual, is to unveil it. And I believe that if you, for instance, would be brave enough to understand what happened in World War II for real, it would save us from making all those mistakes once again in Iraq, in Libya. If we would be clever enough to deal with those issues, we won't have bombs in Manchester or attack in London 2 days ago. And I mentioned it yesterday in my London book launch. I came to this country because it was an Athenian haven. A lot of respect to scholarship, to free exchange, free dialogue, left, right, we speak about things. And I'm quite devastated to find out that all those liberties, elementary rights, freedoms, are under severe attacks. And this place is becoming more and more Jerusalemite. And it is not very surprising, because the lobbies that dominate this society in the last 15, 20 years, and some people will say the last century, are Jewish, Zionist, and Jerusalemite lobbies.
Now, this is the thing that we're not allowed to say anymore. This is the whole point of why we're here, really. We're being shut down. There's this mutual benefit between Britain and Israel, where you might as well call this country the Yiddish Isles. Really. But it goes back a long way. It goes back to British Israel. It goes
or the
back
United Kingdom, some people say.
There's probably many more of those we could come up with. But I mean, you've got Queen Victoria saying that she went back to King David, and this kind of ancient British Israelite thing going on as well. And I think that's part of what it is with especially if you talk to the aristocracy here, they have a reverence for Judaism.
Yeah, you and Jerusalem is quite an established, established song. And if you go to some churches here, you see the word Zion engraved in the stone.
It's on many Catholic churches.
Yeah, Christian Zionism is deeply embedded in your culture. However, the new meaning of this affiliation is quite devastating, because it is okay to be Athenian and to have kind of a light Christian Zionist fetish. But at the moment, we are taking it more than just one step.
I think when we say we've got to be careful, because the we that we talk about are mainly people who have an intellect and can see this sort of thing. The general public are a bit blind to it because they're propagandized so much. And we're talking about a massive propaganda campaign against the minds of the public.
You are right. You're right. And you just mentioned cultural Marxism. One of the most fascinating things that happened to us in the last 2 years is the clear realization that despite cultural Marxism. And despite political correctness and identity politics, and we can elaborate on these terms because they are very important, the vast majority, or at least half of the population, are actually inclined towards authenticity. And the most interesting thing, and I mentioned it yesterday, the most interesting here is that the utopian vision, the idea that we are moving forward into a better world, is actually nostalgia.
Absolutely.
And this is why Trump won in America.
Yeah.
He promised to make America great again.
The only thing people have got to look forward to is what they remember, basically.
Exactly. So instead of the political tyranny and identity politics, we actually want to go back to that past when we had work to go to, when we had the impression that the political system is there to serve us rather than the other way around, because at the moment we are reduced into consumers, and the politicians they care only on one thing. They just there to sustain consumption by means of credit, and they cannot even get credit anymore because we are impoverished. So what we saw in America was a nostalgic outburst. The fascinating success of Corbyn is a nostalgic outburst. Corbyn is an archaic figure, is a 1950s Labour politician.
Yes.
You know, he's very different from this.
It's ironic because the alternative to this horrible dystopian globalism is kind of ironically the old-fashioned left, which is a really interesting time. That
and by the way, the Orwellian left, you know, if you look at George Orwell, he was a socialist. He believed in equality, but he was also an extreme patriot. He was socialist and nationalist. I didn't say a national socialist in order not to confuse anyone. And he was actually an opponent of Nazism, as we know, but it was the racist and the dictatorial elements within Nazism that he didn't agree with. But he was full with admiration to the success, to the miracle within German economy at the time. So we have Trump, we have Corbyn, we have Bernie Sanders. Brexit. What is Brexit? It's a nostalgic outburst. He said, this EU dystopia doesn't work for us.
But also, I think it's about people's they've been put into this paradigm of complete confusion, and they feel they're trapped.
Yeah.
So it's like an escape.
Yeah.
But how do we escape from it? And I think there's the sense of that as well. We're going to have to take a short break now. This is fascinating. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Windows on the World. I'm talking to author and musician Gilad Atzmon, and this is very interesting because Gilad has been attacked by the exact same people we've been attacked by, and other people around the country are getting to be victims of this cultural Marxist agenda, which is actually way beyond cultural Marxism. And we are now the people who are being called fascists and racists, and also Nazis. So welcome back, Gilad. We've talked a little bit about the background to all this, and now we're going to go into a bit more detail on your book Being in Time and what it's really about, because this ties in to this paradigm that we seem to be trapped into at the moment.
Yeah, so we already spoke about political correctness, and I mentioned identity politics, and I think that these terms better be explained. In the old days, the left claimed to unite us all. They used to tell us that it doesn't matter if you're a Jew, black, woman, gay. We were all together fighting for the three most important things: education, health, and manufacturing, production. So you have a good reason to wake up in the morning to go to work. At a certain stage, the left changed its agenda completely, and quite peculiarly. Rather than uniting us, they started to divide us. They started to teach us to speak as a woman, as a gay, as a transsexual, as a black, as a Jew, as a Muslim. Rather than fighting together, we started to fight against each other.
Now, this is very interesting, Gilad, because a few years ago, these change agent groups started to quote Saul Alinsky. And now this is very interesting because they seem to have kind of twisted even what he was saying into creating these fracture groups.
For sure.
And finding these fracture points within society, which
sure.
people like Soros have now exploited.
For sure. Now,
it's our own government that's doing it.
It is great that you are mentioning Soros, because if I run a multi-capitalist business internationally, the last thing that I want is the working class uniting against me. I want to see the working class fractured. And as embarrassing as it may sound, it is Mr. George Soros and his Open Society Institutes, as he calls it, who actually funds all those left organizations that are working 24/7 in a desperate attempt to break us into identity groups. Now, why the left was so stupid to buy into this idea? First, it is not clear whether it bought into the idea. It is more than likely that it was invaded.
Infiltration.
Invaded through infiltration.
Yes.
All right?
That's what I believe.
I also believe, and as much as I like, for instance, Corbyn as a person, I think that even he is contaminated with this cultural Marxist agenda, which is very painful to watch.
And I think that's a very important thing. We've done a show on this, that John Landsman, who wants us to redefine Zionism and the way that we can talk about Zionism. We're going to be told how we can talk about Zionism, what it is, by a Zionist, John Landsman.
By the way, yes. I spoke about it yesterday. By now, and I explained in Being in Time exactly how it works. The discourse of the oppressed, and for that matter, Palestinians, or even you as Brits, is defined by the sensitivities of the oppressor. Yes. So it is the Jewish leftists who are telling us how to deal with Palestine, which is caused by the Jewish state. Yeah. And the same happens to us here. What is amazing about this transformation within the left is that traditional left opposed all forms of biologically determined politics. They were against Nazism or Hitlerian philosophy because it was driven by biological determinism. I'm better because I'm Aryan, you are not as good because you are a Jew or Romani or whatever. All those new identity groups that we are dealing with, women, gays, transsexual, Jews defined by the gene of the mother, black, skin color, are biologically determined. The new left has adopted the most embarrassing aspect of Hitlerian philosophy, because the idea of nationalism merged with socialism is not a bad idea. You know, we say we're thinking about socialism within one state, within one region, within one language, and so on and so on. This is not the problem. The problem that many people have with Hitler, including myself, by the way, has something to do with this racist element that was a clear ingredient within the Hitlerian philosophy. Some people say, by the way, not National Socialism, not German, that it was the Hitlerian introduction or contribution to National Socialism. However, it is very embarrassing to find out that New Left is driven by Hitlerian philosophy. And the next question, how is it possible that the academia kept quiet about it, about this clear transition, the media kept quiet about it. In fact, no one really spoke about it, and the very few who tried were silenced by different means, including violence.
Yes, and now the people who would be able to identify that have all gone from the media.
For sure, they're gone from the media, they were expelled from academia, and so on and so on. This is how I introduced the notion of political correctness. This dystopia was emerging, or sustained, and is still sustained, by political correctness. And what is political correctness? Political correctness is politics that doesn't allow political opposition. Now, politics that doesn't allow political opposition is what we call tyranny. But political correctness is way more dangerous than tyranny, because in the case of tyranny, you oppose a regime, you oppose a tyrant, you oppose a party. In the case of political correctness, we are dealing with self-suppression.
Self-censorship through fear.
Yeah, through fear. And the objectives are very clear. We train you to stop thinking authentically.
Absolutely.
And this is a disaster. I'm a jazz musician. I became a jazz musician in the late 70s because I was listening to artists who were creating great music in the late 40s, 50s, 60s, and then it kind of died.
Yes.
And it died because we reduced jazz, for instance, into an academic studies rather than creating the music, searching for energy. We started to see people identifying themselves as jazz musicians, thinking, what does it mean for me to become a jazz musician? This is the problem with identity politics. And this is, by the way, where I criticize not just Jewish identity politics, but also white identity politics. When you start to identify yourself as you remove yourself from authenticity. Instead of being a saxophonist, I start to identify myself as a saxophonist. I start to ask myself, when I enter a room, what should I say or what should I wear as a musician, as a saxophonist? You introduced an element of self-control or consciousness that is foreign to your authentic behavior. You are more and more removed from being yourself. Now, this is very clear. This is very important. Why half of the Scots wanted to split from Britain when we had the referendum a year ago? Because rather than speaking as Scots, they wanted to be Scots. The Brits who want Brexit, who want to split from Europe, they don't want to speak as Brits, they want to be Brits. Those who voted for Trump, they want to be Americans rather than speaking as a Hispanic, black, as a woman, as a gay. They want to be themselves.
That's what all this social engineering has done now. It's created that. So it starts with self-censorship, then it goes into everything. So this is what we get now. We get in most things a handful of empty gestures. I remember when music was great, because you could go to places like the 100 Club on a Friday afternoon, you could have a few beers, there'd be people there, there'd be musicians there, it had a vibe, it had a swing. That's been taken away from the equation. And it's not just corporatization that's done that.
Sure. No, definitely not. And this is the whole idea of cultural Marxism. Traditional Marxism spoke to us about changing society through division of labor. Cultural Marxism is based on the acceptance that the revolution is not going to happen. Why the revolution is not going to happen? Because you come to John Smith and tell him, listen, we meet tomorrow near the police station and we start a revolution. We meet at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And he said, no, I can't. I'm still at work. Can you do it a bit later? The working class are working class because they go to work. Yes. Something that Corbyn, with all due respect, or Bernie Sanders didn't do for a single day in their life. I mean proper work. They were busy in unions, in politics. Proper work is something that is production related. I'm a musician. I have to produce albums. John Smith make cars. You have to make your broadcast. You were a musician. You are still a musician. Yeah. Politicians, and especially labor politicians or left politicians, are removed from that notion of production, and to a certain extent are removed from the human experience. This is why when we look at the demography, for instance, of the election, and I think that it's a good battle there, and I really hope that Corbyn, I'm critical of some aspects of Corbyn, but I really hope that he's going to win in 2-3 days. But the issue is that you can see that working class are not convinced by labor. More than half of them, if it's accurate, the statistics, don't buy this champagne socialist ideologies pretends to care for working people. This is the reason that we see a clear institutional animosity towards working people within left organizations, within the Labor Party. This is why, for instance, in America, progressives, they call white people, they call them rednecks. Rednecks? Their necks are red because they're exposed to the sun. You are supposed to be the first in defense of these people. This is why Hillary Clinton and her entire campaign couldn't detect the clear fact that the blue-collar American workers were moving away into Trump. This leads us into a deeper understanding of the left. The left is telling us what the world ought to be. The left is shaped like a dream. It's not what it is. It's what we should progress towards. The right is the complete opposite. The right is telling us what the world is. The debate between the left and the right is very simple. The right will tell the leftists, listen, it's a great idea, equality, but can't you see that in reality people are not equal? In fact, the fact that they are not equal makes the world so special. What is happening is, and this will explain to you, I think it took me it was an extended tour, but I think that within 15 seconds we will understand Op-No 8, Antifa, and all those violent, Zionized, Soros-funded organizations. Because the left is shaped like a dream. You, or myself, or few others are a reality call. We are the enemy because we say, it's a great dream, but look what is happening. So the world is moving away. If somebody tried to wake you up at 4 o'clock in the morning you may tend to be slightly violent. This explains the fear that we see in left organizations such as Open 8, Antifa, that is a loose collective. They are really concerned with those people who are trying to waken them up and listen, it's not working.
Welcome back to Windows on the World. I'm talking to author and jazz musician Gilad Atzmon. We're going into depth about identity politics, and also we've been talking about attacks by groups like Antifa and Hope Not Hate. We're discussing broadly Gilad's latest book, Being in Time. Gilad is also the author of other books, including The Wandering Who. So, Gilad, welcome back to Windows on the World. We're talking about the post-truth era.
Yeah, I think that the post-truth is basically that facts which our progressives and radicals cannot handle. They cannot handle the fact that after so many years of cultural Marxism and political correctness or tyranny of correctness and divisive identity politics, still more than half of the Brits want to split away from Europe, which doesn't work well with the Soros agenda, which they were there to serve. Still, Trump becomes the president. And it's not really something to do with left and right. The fact that Corbyn has managed to survive the vile mainstream media attack that was led by the Zionist lobbies in Britain.
Gilad, I'm going to stop you there because I want you to tell me why do you think that the Zionist lobbyists and basically the Israeli agents embedded within the party are so frightened of Corbyn?
To start with, they aren't anymore, because now they accept the fact that this guy may become our prime minister on Friday. And interestingly enough, they stopped calling him an anti-Semite. When is the last time you saw Corbyn labeled as an anti-Semite?
Well, they're labelling his brother as that because of associations with people like us.
Yeah.
Obviously, because we are the enemy of the lobbyists in
Fine,
hate
fine.
and all the rest
I
of it.
can clearly see that the Jewish anti-Corbyn campaign is fading away. And I can tell you that they adapt very, very quickly. However, the good news for us, for people who are interested in truth and in the manner in which truth unveils itself, for us, the fact that Corbyn prevailed, whether he's going to be the prime minister or not, he's going to win, doesn't matter. He really has been giving for quite a few weeks now a good fight to Lady Teresa. The fact that he managed to do it suggests that we are encountering a manifestation of Zio fatigue. A lot of people in this kingdom are tired of the Jewish lobby pushing us into wars. They're tired of the Jewish lobby smearing our most admired politician, people like Ken Livingstone or George Galloway. Whether you agree with George or not, it doesn't matter. And exactly the same thing happened in America. They called Trump an anti-Semite. They spoke about his dog whistling basically referring to his supporters.
Are you saying that these effective but limited tactics are sort of coming to an end? Is that
I
what
don't
you're
know if
saying?
it's coming to an end, and
No,
I tell you,
I don't think it'll come to an end
I
quickly,
don't think that
but-
it's coming to an end.
No.
It should. It should.
Yes.
It should. If they are clever, this should be their lesson. Funny enough, they saw that it didn't work in America. Trump was elected. The more nonsense they poured on this guy, and I'm not a Trump supporter at all, the stronger he became. So they tried it here, and it doesn't work. And the fact that they do it again and again and again, basically invoking hatreds towards Jews, that's what they're doing, made me accept the possibility that Jews have this traditional gadget within their culture that is designed to invoke anti-Jewish feelings. And this is very troubling, and I tell you why. Because the fact that they like to suffer is their problem.
Well, I
But
think
you
it's
don't.
more-
You,
yes.
you, but
They like everyone to know
yeah,
they're suffering.
Yeah, no. But fine. The fact that they like to suffer is fine. But then, what about the rest of us? I don't want to be involved in any violence that they are craving for. You know, every time they suffer, someone else becomes the Nazi, and I would have really love to see that they managed to deal with this problem that is unfortunately a clear ingredient within Jewish culture. And by the way, this is what I did in The Wandering Jew. In my previous book, I said, listen, you're doing that and that and that and that and that. It is not good. It is very dangerous. It is a disaster awaiting to happen. And the first thing that they did was an institutional attempt to burn the book with me. And I learned that when they try to destroy me, to cancel my gigs, to burn my books, it only happens because I'm saying something that should be said, something meaningful. They somehow know that I'm telling the truth. Not somehow, they know that I'm telling the truth. By the way, I've never seen anyone suggesting that I'm wrong or misleading or make mistakes on facts or my argumentation.
It's never the facts that they argue with.
Yeah.
It's the person.
It's the person, and they don't even argue with the person. They basically, this is something that is very clear, and your audience, your viewers should know. I argue that there are no Jewish conspiracies. This is very, very, very important. Everything is done in the open. The Jewish lobby in America, in France, in Britain, has been pushing us to a war against Iran. In the open, they did it in the open. Syria, they did it in the open. Iraq, they did it in the open. When we were taken to Iraq, it was the LFI, the Labor Friends of Israel. Lord Levi was the chief fundraiser of Blair's government. David Aronovich, Nick Cohen was pushing for it in the British press. Everything is done in the open. There are no Jewish conspiracies. What they do, they use different tactics. Political correctness, tyranny of correctness. You cannot talk about it. If you point at Lord Levi, you may get into trouble. I did. And I got into trouble, and I survived.
Well, we saw the lobby, the Al Jazeera documentary. It was quite shocking that the way Joan Ryan completely demonized a Labour MP because she supported Palestine.
Yeah, and this is the next question. If I were Corbyn, I'm not, by the way, because if I were, I would, within the next 24 hours, after the first episode, there were 4, would clean my party. And by the way, maybe it's good that I'm not Corbyn, because he didn't, Mr. Nice Guy. And despite him being nice, he still stands a very good chance to win the election because he has a momentum. He's slightly behind now, but I think that his supporters are way more enthusiastic than Theresa May's supporters.
It does appear to be so when you look around the country, and of course to have even survived this far has been quite remarkable, I think.
Yes.
With what's happened to him, and of course his brother Piers is on the show regularly, and we know about all of the smear tactics, all of the very tried and trusted things that work.
Yeah.
And I suppose we talked about the post-truth era. We might now be talking about a new truth era because the truth may be starting to win through.
Yeah, I think that the most interesting thing about the truth, and I don't claim to know the truth, but I think that I'm quite good as a seeker of the truth. The truth is this unique habit to unveil itself against all odds. And this is why the lobby is so fearful. Because they have something to hide. They must be hiding something about the Holocaust if we have so much legislation to keep it as it is. I don't claim to know what it is that they are hiding because I'm not an historian. My knowledge of German is minimal. I cannot engage in any of any historical research properly. But when the past is inaccessible by legal means, we have a good reason to believe that something is not right. And this is exactly what I try to do. I said, listen, it's my past, for fuck's sake. It's my past. It's your past. This town, some part of it were obliterated. What about Germany? German cities were wiped out. Why German cities were wiped out? Why did we flatten? We sent B-17s, thousands of them, and Lancasters to wipe out German cities? Why can't we really talk about it within the context of an industrial, homicidal machine? I think that this is the story. We have a lot of shame to do with that war. We, the West, not just the Germans. And the Holocaust is kind of a blanket that covers all of it. But I think that it is very interesting because actually the guy, Black Earth, Snyder, Timothy Snyder, I think is the name of this. He's a Holocaust Orthodox historian, and yet I really I always take something from him. He spoke about the idea that the most important message we can draw from reading the history of World War II is that when countries are falling apart, we have a genocide. And he said this is why we had genocide in Poland and in parts of Russia, but we didn't have genocide in France or in Holland, for instance. And he said, and look at us now. We do exactly the same thing in Syria. We do exactly the same thing in Iraq. In Libya, we learned nothing. This is the whole idea. History, for me, and this is connected, I think, with post-truth, because truth is a dynamic notion. History is the ability to narrate the past as we move along. So as we move along, and Timothy Snyder see what is happening in Syria and Iraq, he suddenly possess better means to understand what really happened in Poland at the time of World War II. This means that the future is tied with the past. And this is exactly where the Jewish lobby is interfering. He said, no, you don't touch our past. Sorry, guys, I have to touch your past because it's my past as well. It's the past of your grandfather who fought in this war. It's our past, and it's the future of our humanity and our humanism. We look at the past, we look at the future. Our past is changing as the future is transforming into something else, and our future is transforming into something different and maybe hopefully better as soon as we understand our wrongdoing in the past.
We need to look at the past objectively and be able to look at the past objectively and without interference from the state or anybody else.
For sure.
And that's why we're here, and that's what we're talking about. Our shows on autonomous media feature the intelligence-led mind control operation known as political correctness. We've been discussing that and how World War II propaganda against Germany came out of the Tavistock Institute. We haven't had time to get into that today, but I'd like to thank Gilad Atzmon for coming in. It's been really revealing, and would you come in again?
On a daily basis, if you don't mind.
Well, now you know where we are. That's great. Thanks, Gilad.
Great,
I know you've
pleasure.
got to get off to a gig.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's it from
Yeah.
Windows on the World, and we'll see you soon. Join me, Mark Windows, with Tony Hurst for Windows on the World Live every Sunday, 9 to 11 p.m. GMT at autonomousmedia.net.